Welcome to Crown TV. Immerse yourself with a captivating audio from our stories. We provide an alternative way to read books in audio. We upload many audiobooks as possible, from bestsellers to timeless classic. Subscribe and stay tuned for new uploads.
Episode 186. It's all in the garbage? Flora looked at Alex and spoke kindly, but her eyes were firm. Then she was quiet. She was well acquainted with Ken and knew that there was no way he would violate the family's orders and secretly help her son. She had already asked him several times, but she knew that she was putting him in a difficult position. She didn't want to risk aggravating him or turning him against Alex, so that if ever he was really in trouble, he would think twice about helping him. "Mr. Stokes, I would like to have a private word with my son," she told him. "Of course," Ken replied as he stood up and walked to the door. Then he turned around and said respectfully, "Mrs. Ambrose, the family has said that you mustn't help Alex. He has done very well so far. I advise that you don't ruin it now." Ken had worked for the Ambrose family for 30 years. He knew that the head of the family was very firm in his instructions, but also that Flora was desperate to help her son. He was worried that after he left, she would be tempted to give him a bank card or valuable item that he could sell. This would cause a lot of problems for her and Alex if the rest of the family found out. "Mr. Stokes, don't worry, I understand," she replied with a smile. As soon as Ken left, Flora's expression became serious. She flipped open her cell phone case and looked at the $10 million bank card that she kept in there. But she didn't take it out. During their dinner, she and Alex chatted about their lives and enjoyed each other's company. They both cherished their time together, and although they were talking about trivial matters, it felt very special to them. He told her that he was planning to stay in Washington, D.C. for a period of time, and that he was in no rush to get back to New York. Flora was afraid that this would interrupt his studies, so she said that she would arrange for him to switch to Richmond University. If anyone asked, she would remind them that the family had always had a tradition of putting education first. They could have no argument with that. Alex agreed that he should switch to Richmond University, and Flora knew that he was only doing this so that he could stay in Washington, D.C. and pursue Debbie. Good moments always pass quickly, and soon the meal was over, and it was time for Flora to leave. As the head of business in Southern Europe, she was always very busy. Ken followed Alex and Flora out of the hotel. Before leaving, Flora took Alex to see some people she had noticed living in a squat nearby. There, they found a group sitting on the floor lifelessly. Some stood holding bowls of soup. Some ate with their hands, and some poured soup straight from the dishes into their mouths. Their chins were covered with vegetable dregs. Their clothes, especially their t-shirts, were greasy. Flora and Alex glanced at them, then walked away. They didn't want to see any more. Flora felt that she had made her point about the importance of Alex's education. When they came to a $200,000 Porsche, Alex couldn't help laughing. He asked, "Mom, why are you driving a Porsche?" "One of my new business clients in Europe is Porsche. Of course, I have to be familiar with their cars," she replied with a smile. She looked at Ken and said, "Mr. Stokes, my eyesight isn't very good. Would you be happy to drive me?" Alex was surprised. He thought, "I know that Mom's eyesight is excellent. Why is she lying to Ken? Is she just too lazy to drive?" "Okay," Ken answered and walked around to the driver's door. "Wait a minute," Flora said as she suddenly grabbed him. With a bashful smile, she continued, "It's a real mess inside as I hardly ever clean it. I need to tidy up a bit so you won't think less of me." She smiled at Ken and climbed into the car. Although Flora was over 40 years old, she had been exceptionally beautiful when she was younger, and she was still very charming and attractive. Her smile made Ken go weak at the knees as he glanced at her in admiration. When he noticed Alex watching him, he coughed and blushed. After several minutes, Flora climbed out of the Porsche. To the surprise of both the men, she pulled out 5 bulging black garbage bags. They were astonished. They would never have imagined that someone could clear out so much garbage from such a small car. She handed the bags to Alex and said, "I'm in a hurry to leave. Please, can you help me by getting rid of these bags in the trash? But before you throw them away, make sure you sort through them carefully. I heard that the council is very strict on recycling, and you will be fined if you put the wrong items into the garbage." She then turned to Ken and said, "Mr. Stokes, shall we go?" She waved goodbye to Alex and they drove away. It was not until they had left that Alex started to think. He took the bags of trash to the recycling site. There was no one around, so he was tempted to throw them all into the general garbage container. But he remembered that his mother had been very specific about him sorting through them. He opened the bags. 4 of them contained the usual domestic garbage, but the last one was heavy. He untied it and removed some newspapers from the top. Underneath, he found piles of banknotes. They weren't dollar bills, but euros. He guessed that the bag contained hundreds of thousands of euros, which would be even more in dollars. He was stunned and moved by his mother's kindness. She had gone to so much trouble to help him. At that moment, he received a text message from his mother. It said, "Have you dealt with the garbage? If you have dealt with it, now you should go home and relax." He knew that she was wary of the family checking her messages, so he worded his response carefully. He replied, "It's hard to classify the garbage. Fortunately, I've done it carefully. I'm going home now." Seeing his text, Flora smiled and relaxed. Alex returned to his rental house with the garbage bag of euros. He couldn't take the money to the bank because his family would find out. He decided to temporarily store it under the bed. 3 days later, he received a text message from his mother, saying that she had enrolled him at Richmond University, and he could start there at the beginning of the new term. She sent him all the details of his new department, tutor, and dormitory number. Although the family agreed to let Alex switch to Richmond University to continue his education, his official identity was still as a poor pancake seller. They refused to lift the ban on him until he gave up his search for Debbie. He spent the next few days preparing to start his new university course. He knew that he had to tell Nellie that he could no longer work in the food truck. He had looked so tired recently that he could hardly bear to tell her. That particular day, they had kept the truck in a city park for the whole day and had been very busy. In the evening, Alex sat in his room for a long time before he plucked up the determination to go and knock on Nellie's door. She was happy to see him, and she said, "You're here. Give me a shoulder rub. I'm so tired. I must have made at least 200 pancakes today." She often asked him to rub her shoulders after the day's work, so he was not surprised. He asked her to sit down. While rubbing her shoulders, he finally said, "I can only work for you for 3 more days. Then I'll be leaving." He felt her body tremble slightly. "Are you going back to New York?" she asked without looking at him. He replied, "No, I'm transferring to Richmond University." "Fine. Off you go. There's no need to discuss it with me," she said. She turned her head and looked at him with a small smile. "Oh, I see. You're just here to ask me for your pay before you go. Well, you've missed so many hours recently, I'm not going to give you anything. Alex had expected her to feel a little sad that he was leaving and was disappointed by her reaction. He joked, "Come on, Nellie, I've worked hard for 2 months. You didn't give me a dime. Aren't you afraid that I'll complain and get the police to arrest you?" Nellie looked at his smiling face and lowered her head. Alex didn't understand why she didn't care that he was leaving. He had just made a little joke to try to cheer her up, but she didn't react at all. Then he noticed that her shoulders were trembling, and as he looked at her, 2 big tears fell onto her lap. He was surprised and started to ask, "Why are you—" "Get out of here!" Nellie shouted suddenly. She raised her head and Alex saw that her eyes were hazy with tears. She glared at him angrily. He said, "Is it that what I said that upset you? I'm so sorry, Nellie. I know my joke went too far. I never meant to hurt you. I know you've been hurt in the past. Can you tell me about it?" She bit her lip and looked at him with hatred. Finally, she sighed softly and said, "I was thinking about someone I knew when I was a child. One day I picked up one of his toys to look at. When he saw me with it, he shouted at me. I was so upset that I cried and hit him. He pressed me to the ground, kicked me, screamed at me, and threw me out of his house. He told me he was going to get the police to arrest me, just like you did just now." Alex was angry and distressed. He hugged her and said in a soft voice, "I was just joking with you. What he did to you was cruel, and I want to help you get your revenge. I'll help you find him, and then I'll beat him for you." Nellie interrupted him in a loud voice. "If you hit him, I'll hit you even harder." Alex was stunned and asked, "But you told me that he beat you, scolded you, and threw you out of his house. Why would you protect him?" She blushed, but she still looked at him stubbornly and said, "I just like him. What's the matter? You think I'm cheap, don't you?" He replied softly, "No, the love between men and women often can't be explained." She looked surprised that he understood. "If you like him so much, why don't you go to him?" he asked. She looked flustered. She lowered her head and said, "He's handsome, and he comes from a wealthy family. Not only am I ugly, but I'm just a pancake seller. I'm not good enough for him." Alex shook his head and said, "So what? Why shouldn't you find him and see what he thinks? Who says that you're not good enough for him? Who says that rich and poor people can't be together? I know that I like Miss Marvel. I'm convinced that if I'm persistent, I'll succeed with her in the end. Why don't you believe in yourself?" She replied, "You're wrong. He'll never want to be with me." "Nellie, you're so stubborn. You should open your mind a little bit." Nellie was really upset by that point. She had already thought everything through. She had spent her whole life thinking about that man, and she had accepted that she would never be with him. Now, Alex was trying to put other thoughts into her head. She covered her ears and screamed at him, "Get out, loser! I hate you! Get out!" She pushed him out of the door. Episode 187, New Beginnings. Alex stood outside the door for a moment and listened to Nellie weeping in her room. He felt awful. He sighed and went back to his room to have a rest. The next day, when he saw her, she seemed back to her usual self. He didn't know what to say, so he didn't mention their conversation from the previous evening. They worked together in the food truck, as usual. 3 days later, it was his last day working with her before he started at the university the following day. That evening, he returned to his rental room and started packing up his things. Later, he was cooking himself some chicken soup when he heard someone banging on the door. When he opened it, he was surprised to find Nellie standing there holding a plate of pancakes. "Hey," he said. Nellie put the plate on the table and said with a smile, "Please eat them. I made them for you." Alex was pleasantly surprised and realized that she had brought them to celebrate their last day working together. He felt very touched as he sat down to eat the pancakes with his chicken soup. To him, the food tasted delicious. He looked at Nellie and said, "Your pancakes taste wonderful." She answered, "I know." She had been carefully watching Alex as he ate, and she thought to herself, "He really is a lovely boy. His heart is as sweet as honey." She looked at him again, and with a small smile, she said tenderly, "Alex, I was wrong the other night. Please don't hate me." "Of course I don't hate you. You think too much," he replied with a smile. "I know you really like that man you told me about. The only thing stopping you is," he wanted to say, "an inferiority complex." But he didn't want to anger her again, so he stopped himself. Instead, he said, "I believe that we make our own happiness. I think you should take the initiative to find him and tell him how you feel. I think there's still reason to be hopeful." Nellie had spent the previous 2 days giving serious consideration to what Alex had said. She replied, "But I'm so worried that if I find him, he'll laugh at me again for being ugly and for thinking I could be with someone like him." Alex responded, "But at least then you'll know how he feels toward you, and then you can stop thinking about him. It would still be better than not knowing. But don't be too pessimistic. You also said that you knew him when you were both children. You've both grown up since then. Maybe if you meet him now, he will like you." "Do you really think so?" she murmured. Alex replied, "Of course I do. Unfortunately, I can't help you look for him right now, but when things are sorted out with Miss Marvel, I'll go with you to find him. If he's polite, then I'll leave you to it. If he's rude to you like he was when he was a child, I'll beat him up for you." Nellie was very moved. In her whole life, no one had ever defended her in this way. She tried to hold back the tears that had welled up in her eyes. With a small smile, she said, "Well, thank you. But don't say any more now. Eat your dinner. There's plenty left." The next day, Alex got up early. He had bought a suitcase, and he packed all his clothes into it, with the garbage bag full of euros safely hidden in the middle. He put his backpack onto his back, picked up the suitcase, and walked out of his room. He planned to say hello to Nellie, who had slept on the sofa, and then report to Richmond University. However, Nellie had already gotten up. She asked Alex to eat some pancakes that were left over from the previous night. When he finished eating, she gently patted him on the shoulder. When he turned around, he found her holding out a stack of dollar bills toward him. She said, "This is your wage. It was $1,200 in total. I didn't deduct a single dollar from you." Alex now had a huge amount of money in his suitcase. So he said, "No, please keep the money." Nellie was bewildered. She asked, "Why did you work for me if you didn't want the money? I know you need it. I'm leaving now. You take the money." As far as she knew, he was as poor as she was. Alex hesitated. He had no way of proving his real identity to her, so he took the money. He thought, "I have her bank details. If she looks like she's struggling, I can always transfer it to her." Nellie drove Alex to the university in the food truck. Outside the front gate, they climbed out of the truck. All around them, students were walking past with their suitcases. A girl approached Alex and said, "Alex?" He saw that it was Philippa. They chatted, and it turned out that Philippa was also studying at Richmond University. She had been feeling a little guilty, but also grateful to Alex since they had last met. However, she hadn't had the nerve to call him. She was surprised but pleased to bump into him again. "Have you come to Richmond University to do business?" she asked him. "Leave him alone," Nellie said sternly as she glared at Philippa. She remembered that the last time they had met, Philippa and Miriam had laughed unkindly at Alex. Philippa smiled and didn't say anything. Alex said softly to Nellie, "It's okay, we're old classmates, and now we're studying at the same university." Although Philippa was a little confused, she remembered how Mr. Stokes and the beautiful woman had helped Alex in the Ruby Hotel the last time they met. They had both left an impression on her. Philippa took Nellie's hand and said, "I was wrong the last time we met. I feel terrible. I will never look down on anyone again." Nellie looked back at her suspiciously but didn't say anything else. She turned to Alex and said, "I'm hoping to make a lot of money here today with the truck. I better go and set up." "Well, in the future, when you're parked here at the university, let me know and we'll eat lunch together in the cafeteria," Alex said. Then he watched Nellie go back to the food truck and start selling pancakes to the students. He and Philippa walked through the gate to the university. As they went through the gate, they heard a lot of talking and laughing coming from behind them. Alex turned his head and saw a young man surrounded by beautiful women. He was tall and athletic and stood very straight. He was well dressed in an expensive shirt and pants and designer shoes. He also wore Prada glasses, which made him look like a movie star. Two beautiful women stood at each side of him, obviously flirting outrageously. The young man held a bottle of Evian in his hand and looked very relaxed. The women giggled at his jokes, complimented him, and occasionally clapped their hands. It was clear that the four girls were trying to persuade the young man to put his arms around their waists, but he didn't seem to be interested in cuddling them. The man and the beautiful girls were very eye-catching, and they quickly became the center of attention. Everyone passing by stopped to look at them with envious glances. As Alex watched, the man and his friends arrived at the gate. They stood side by side and blocked a car from entering. It was a very expensive sports car. Alex guessed its value to be at least $100,000. He assumed that the car belonged to someone rich and powerful, but it appeared that the driver didn't even dare to sound the horn. Philippa noticed Alex looking curiously at the tall man and explained, "That's Colin Patterson. He's in the music department. His family is very rich, and all the girls in the school fancy him." Alex understood what Philippa had told him, but still had some doubts. "Oh, okay," he nodded, and then he said with a puzzled smile, "I can see that he has some pretty girls following him around, but they're blocking that car from getting in. They're lucky the owner of the car is so relaxed. He isn't even sounding the horn to get them to move. No matter how rich his family is, I'm surprised that the driver isn't doing anything." As Colin and his friends approached them, Philippa pulled Alex to the side, out of their way. One of the beautiful girls said with a smile, "Colin, I love it when we walk with you. Everyone moves to make way for us." Colin replied with a smile, "They're giving way to me because you four are with me. The fact is that they're ashamed of themselves and can't help but get out of my way." "Colin, you can really make us happy. You're so sweet that I really don't want to leave you for a moment," the four girls laughed. When Colin passed Alex, he didn't even notice his existence. He saw straight through him. The five of them walked down the road with the car slowly driving behind them. When they reached a fork in the road, the driver rolled down the window. He didn't look like a student. He called out to Colin, "Colin, I'll wait for you at Ocean Building later." Colin just glanced at him and then continued to walk with the four girls. Philippa and Alex looked at each other with a smile. They realized that the car belonged to Colin and that the man driving it was his valet. That was why he hadn't dared to sound the horn. Philippa showed him the way to the dormitory building of the Department of Life Sciences. "What happened that day has always bothered me, Alex. Do you still blame me?" she asked as they walked together. Alex shook his head and said with a smile, "If I had blamed you, would I have let you go that day?" That put Philippa's mind at ease. She asked, "How do you know Mr. Stokes? Who was that beautiful lady and why did they help you?" Alex knew that he couldn't tell Philippa his true identity. Even if he did tell her, he knew that she wouldn't believe him. He quickly invented an explanation and said, "Actually, I was just lucky. Mr. Stokes brought the lady to buy 2 pancakes from the stand. She thought that the pancakes I made were delicious, and she gave me a lot of praise. She knew I was a poor college student and couldn't go back to New York, so she persuaded Mr. Stokes to help me switch to Richmond University. It was a coincidence that I saw them again in the Ruby Hotel that day. I don't know anything else about them." "Oh, is that all?" Philippa had never imagined that Ken had helped Alex simply because of 2 pancakes. When she saw him nodding, she asked, "Do you still have contact with them? If you have any more difficulties and want them to help, will they?" He replied, "No, I don't even have their contact information. Besides, they've already helped me once. I'm not related to them. Why should they help me again?" "That's what I thought," Philippa said. She was a bit frustrated. She still had her plans and thought that if Alex could talk to Ken, maybe he could convince him to help her find a good job in the future. Now, it seemed that it was not possible. Episode 188, Welcome New Enemies. Once Philippa had shown Alex to his dorm, he quickly found his own room. His 3 new roommates looked at him as he walked in and thought he must have gone to the wrong room. Once they had called the administration office and confirmed that he was indeed their new roommate, he started to unpack his things. The 3 roommates were very curious about the fact that he was able to switch from another university. He lied to them that it was because his family was poor, and Washington State had special policies for people like him that allowed him to switch. When the 3 roommates saw that Alex was wearing cheap but new clothes, they asked him more about his background. He told them that he had worked in a food truck for 2 months during the summer to earn the money. They all sympathized with him, and he was grateful for their kindness. He felt very guilty for lying to these 3 kind-hearted students. He slept in his new dormitory that night, and the next day he went to the classroom with his roommates. The tutor found him and talked with him privately in his office. To his surprise, the tutor didn't know anything about his background or his true identity. He really believed that he was a poor student who transferred to Richmond University through a special policy of the education department. The tutor introduced Alex to the whole class, and he officially became a student of the Richmond University biology department. The other students in the class thought that he must be from a wealthy family to be able to switch schools, but when they saw that he was wearing cheap clothes, they quickly lost interest in him. Some even laughed together about his clothes and joked about his scruffy shoes with the people nearby. Alex didn't care what others thought about him. After class, he ran out of the classroom. He wanted to find out which class Leona was in. At the same time that Alex was being introduced to his new classmates, a new student was also being introduced into the music department. That student was wearing a black silky top and a short pink skirt. Her arms and legs were perfectly white. She had long black hair and eyes like pools of water under the night sky. The tutor told the class, "Everyone, this is the new student who has been transferred to our class, Miss Leona Marvel. As she is new, please help her settle in and take good care of her." "Yes, we'll take good care of Leona," several lively boys cried out. Everyone else in the class was whispering to each other. One student said, "Leona is from the Marvel family. They're one of the top 5 families in Washington, D.C. I heard that her father is looking for a husband for her." His friend replied excitedly, "Wow, and now she's in our class. Whoever wins her heart and joins the Marvel family will never have to worry about anything ever again." His friend laughed and said, "You're dreaming, aren't you? Don't even think about it. She would never consider one of us. Stop teasing me." "Well, I guess that out of the whole school, Colin is the only one who stands a chance with her," agreed his friend. Leona introduced herself and sat down. Lots of excited boys immediately gathered around her. Of course, they knew that they didn't really stand a chance with her, and they didn't dare to actually sit next to her. But they felt very lucky just to be in the same class as her. Alex searched the classrooms one by one and finally found Leona's class. "Miss Marvel," he said when he saw her. She was sitting very quietly, and he felt a bit self-conscious as he walked into the room and approached her. "What are you doing?" Several boys stood up and blocked him. Alex ignored them and focused on Leona. But when she looked up at him, he saw a trace of disgust in her eyes. He thought, "She has told me several times now that she's not Debbie, but I haven't listened. Maybe she's starting to get angry." He felt like he had been doused with cold water. "I was too bold today," he thought. Approaching her on her first date in front of everyone has only made her angry. He took a last glance at her and left the classroom. The boys in the class saw that he was badly dressed. They had never met him or heard his name before. They thought that he was a stupid little loser and the whole incident was a joke. Alex printed a copy of Leona's class schedule from the university website. He decided to visit her whenever he could to try to build a good relationship with her. He remained convinced that as long as he persevered, Leona would eventually be moved by him. He watched her for 3 days and observed that she attended all her lectures, listened attentively, and took notes every day. Although plenty of boys admired her, none had dared ask her out. Alex was satisfied to bide his time. On the 4th day, when he went to find her after class, he saw a handsome boy sitting beside her. It was Colin, whom he had met at the school gate on the first day of term. Alex stood at the door and watched them talking. He could hear that they were talking about music. Folk music originated from the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl in the prairies in the 1930s. The focus isn't on vocal skills, but on a more natural sound. I particularly like We Shall Overcome by Joan Baez. Bob Dylan and Woody Guthrie are also very good, Colin said with a smile. Leona's eyes were full of appreciation. She said, "You know so much about music. I know nothing compared to you." He replied gently, "Miss Marvel, you flatter me. I've still got so much to learn, but I realize that you and I have very similar interests. Perhaps we can spend more time together." Leona smiled and continued to chat with Colin. When she happened to glance toward the door, she saw Alex standing there, but she quickly looked away and continued chatting with Colin. She didn't react to Alex's presence at all. Alex's heart froze for a second, and he was overwhelmed with a sense of panic. He clenched his fists, and his nails were deeply embedded into the flesh of his palm, but he couldn't feel it at all. Colin noticed Leona looking at the door and also glanced in that direction. When he saw Alex gazing at her affectionately, he was surprised at first and then laughed indifferently. He didn't pay him any more attention, thinking that he was just one of her admirers. He thought, I can understand that loser's admiration for her beauty, but that's all it is, admiration and fantasy. Alex had a strong urge to rush up and drag Leona away, but he knew that it would only make her hate him even more. He had to wait. Watching Leona and Colin chatting and getting along so well, his heart felt like it was being pierced by a knife. He slammed the classroom door and ran back to the dormitory. "What's up, buddy?" Eddie asked when he saw how lost Alex looked when he walked back into the dorm. The four roommates got along well and had spent a lot of time chatting over the last few days. Alex knew that none of them had much money. "I'm fine," he answered and lay down on his bed. His mind was all over the place when he imagined Leona and Colin together. "Well, you don't look fine, but okay. We're taking the names of people to perform at the New Year's party. Do you feel like doing it?" Eddie asked. He was the secretary of the school's student union, and they were trying to encourage students to take part in the show. "Sorry, it doesn't appeal to me," Alex replied casually. Eddie raised his eyebrows and said, "Come on, dude. There'll be loads of beautiful girls at the party. Even losers like us will be able to pull." Beautiful girls? When Eddie said that, Alex looked at him. He wondered whether Leona would be going to the party. He asked, "Do you have a list? Can I see it?" Eddie got out the program for the party and handed it to Alex. Scanning it, he quickly found Leona's name on it. Chasing a Dream, performers, Colin Patterson, Leona Marvel, Doug Finchley, Fiona Stellwood. Seeing Colin and Leona listed together, Alex felt a pain in his heart. But it was at least an opportunity to see her again, an opportunity that he wanted to seize. He said to Eddie, "I'll go. Add me to the list." "Excellent," said Eddie. "I just had to mention the beautiful girls, and now you want to go." He added Alex to the list. In the afternoon, they went to the auditorium together. The performers were practicing there, and dancers were auditioning to take part. Alex felt a little tired, so he found a seat and leaned against it. About an hour later, he was woken up by the sound of music. He rubbed his confused eyes and looked around him to find that there were now a couple of hundred students in the auditorium with him. Some of them were on the stage practicing, and others were watching and waiting in their seats. The director was using a microphone to organize everything. He said through the megaphone, "Okay, Colin and Leona, it's your turn to practice once. We haven't got much time. Let Colin try the microphone first." The performers were supposed to be given rehearsal time in order of their arrival. As Colin and Leona had only arrived 10 minutes previously, they should have had to wait about 2 hours for their turn. However, they were both from important families. Colin was one of the most eligible bachelors in Washington and one of the star students at Richmond University, while Leona was from one of the top 5 families in the city. The director had come under a lot of pressure to give them preferential treatment. The other performers were told to make way for Colin and Leona to perform. Many of them complained loudly, but they left the stage anyway. Colin and Leona had been sitting in the first row of the audience, chatting through the details of their performance. When they saw that the stage had been cleared for them, Colin took a long sip from his can of soda, put it on the ground, and invited Leona up onto the stage to practice. When he saw them stepping onto the stage, Alex stood up and walked along the aisle between the seats. As he reached the front row, he heard Leona starting to sing. He sat down in the seat that she had just vacated and looked up at her on the stage. "Where is the world full of flowers? If it does exist, then I will go. I want to stand on the highest mountain. I don't care if it is a cliff or not." Leona sang the 4 lines beautifully. Then she stopped singing and looked at Colin. "Live hard and love bravely. Don't ask for anyone's satisfaction. Just be worthy of yourself." Colin also sang very well, which surprised Alex. He looked too macho to have such a melodious voice. But even people who didn't know much about music recognized that he had a very good voice and was a highly trained singer. The girls in the audience watched him adoringly, as if he was already a superstar. "About my dream, I never choose." Colin was reaching the last 2 words of his lines when he let out a loud hiccup. The whole audience was stunned into silence for a moment. It sounded so funny that a few students started to laugh, but stopped when they saw the people around them glaring at them. Then they bit their lips and pinched their flesh to control their laughter. Colin was mortified, and his face turned bright red. He didn't dare to look at Leona because he couldn't bear to see her reaction. Fortunately, no one else laughed, and Colin started to sing again as if nothing had happened. Then, suddenly, Alex just couldn't help it. He was already finding the disparity between the way Colin looked and the way he sang funny. Then, when he made a fool of himself in front of Leona, he was so happy that he just couldn't contain his laughter. Episode 189, The Brawl Begins. At that moment, the auditorium was quiet, and Alex's laughter sounded particularly loud and harsh. Colin locked his eyes on Alex in a resentful glare. He glanced surreptitiously at Leona and saw that she was amused, which only made him angrier. The director thought that Alex was behaving so crassly that he immediately ran over to the center of the stage, pointed at him, and said loudly into the microphone, "What are you laughing at?" "What am I laughing at?" Alex repeated. He knew that Leona was watching and didn't want her to think that he was rude. "You're obviously laughing at Colin's hiccup. Why don't you just admit it?" asked the director. "If you knew what I was laughing at, why did you bother to ask?" Alex replied. The director's face burned red as he looked at Colin. When he saw how angry Colin was with him, he felt very anxious. Colin looked at Alex and said angrily, "If you laugh again, I'll get you thrown out of here." Alex now felt annoyed himself. First, this guy was colluding with his girlfriend, and now he was talking down to him in this way. He sneered and said, "I can laugh if I want. How are you going to stop me?" Usually, Alex managed to bite his tongue and remain polite even when he was angry. But he was so depressed about Colin that he just couldn't stop himself from being rude. When the other students heard that he had dared to challenge Colin, they were surprised, angry, and amused. They were also not very impressed with Alex. One student said, "This boy is crazy. Who is he? What's his background?" "I just can't believe he's challenging Colin. What an idiot," answered his friend. The first student continued excitedly, "Look at him. He's wearing cheap clothes. He looks like a total loser next to Colin, and yet he still dares to stand up to him If Colin's on form, he'll destroy him. Colin sneered at Alex and said, "Well, I'm not going to waste my time on scum like you." Then he called out to someone backstage. "Can someone call security to kick this idiot out?" The head of security arrived with 2 of his men and said, "No problem, Colin. I've had my eye on this guy. We'll get rid of him now." Alex looked at Colin and said, "Wait, Colin, what right do you have to get me kicked out?" Colin was a very proud person. He wanted to say, "With my power, I have the right to do whatever I want to do." But he suddenly realized that Leona was watching everything. He was afraid that she would be disgusted with him if he was so arrogant. So he changed his words and said, "You're not even here to rehearse. You're just distracting us while we're trying to practice. That's why you should leave." "Who says I'm not here to rehearse?" Alex said. "My name is Alex, and you'll find me on the list. Look for yourself if you don't believe me." "Nonsense, I've read the list. I would remember you," said the director. "Is he telling the truth?" Colin asked, as he turned to look at the director, who immediately took out the program and started looking for Alex's name. After a moment, his face froze. He murmured, "Damn," in a low voice. Then he looked at Colin and said, "It's true, his name is on the program. He's one of your dancers." "What?" Colin grabbed the director's list and saw Alex's name on it for himself. He looked at Alex angrily, and when Alex smiled back, he could barely control himself. He said, "Okay, so you are on the list, yes, but I'm telling you now that you can leave. I don't need you to dance for us." "If you make me leave, you'll be damaging your own performance. I'll tell you the truth. I didn't sign up to help you. I came for Leona," Alex said. "Leona doesn't need you either. Now go," Colin said firmly. He glanced at Leona and saw that she was looking anxiously at Alex. He was slightly surprised by that, and he could tell from her face that she did know him. Then he remembered seeing him standing at the door of the classroom a few days earlier while he'd been getting to know Leona. He wondered what was going on between them. "Leona, do you want him to dance with you?" Colin asked, feeling a little guilty. Alex dared to look at Leona. He was afraid that she would also want him to leave. They looked at each other. Her eyes were puzzled, angry, disgusted, and helpless. Alex simply stared into her eyes and refused to look away. His hand was gripping the armrest. "I don't know," she answered. Her eyes narrowed and she said in a low voice, "You decide." Colin looked at Alex again. He felt that he had become a thorn in his side. He was upset that Leona hadn't taken the opportunity to get rid of Alex when she could. He felt that he had already lost this battle. "Well, now that you're here, I'll give you a chance. The song we're performing this time is a very energetic song. We need dancers who are athletic and fit. I doubt that you're strong enough." Alex looked quietly at Colin and thought, "I know that I'm strong, but how are you planning to test me?" Colin said, "I have a test for you. If you can knock me down to the ground, I'll let you participate. Do you dare to try?" Everyone smiled and looked at Alex. They were convinced that he would not take on Colin's dare. "Is he going to do it?" one student asked his friend. "I can't believe he is," the friend replied. "Go on, pretty boy, give it your best shot," the student taunted Alex. Alex stood up slowly and walked to one side. The audience looked at him and assumed that he was going to leave. They all sneered at him for being a loser, for daring to challenge Colin, but not following through with his challenge. But Alex didn't leave. Instead, he climbed up the steps onto the stage. Everyone was shocked. They didn't know his true identity and thought that he was being very arrogant. He slowly walked over to Colin as the director approached them with a microphone. The audience was astonished when he blocked Alex and stood in front of him, yelling at him through the microphone. "You stupid loser! You're a nobody, and you dared to challenge Colin? What are you thinking of? I'm the director here, and I'm ordering you to leave now. Off you go. We don't need you here." Alex shoved the director's shoulder, and he fell to the ground. Several students rushed to his side and helped him up. They were ready to fight Alex together, but Colin stopped them. In front of Leona, Colin was determined to retain his composure, but he also wanted to teach Alex a lesson. The director said to Alex, "You probably didn't know that Colin participated in the National Youth Games last year and won second place in the Taekwondo competition. You have no chance if you take him on. It would be much better for you if you just left now without any further embarrassment." To ingratiate himself to Colin, the director had taken time to learn about his background. When the spectators heard that Colin was a Taekwondo expert, they understood what he had planned for Alex. They were looking forward to seeing what happened. Alex ignored the director and continued to walk toward Colin. Leona stepped up to Alex and whispered, "Stop now. It's not worth it." She really didn't want these men to fight over her. Then, when she heard that Colin was a master of Taekwondo, she became very worried that Alex would get seriously hurt. "It's okay, I can fight him," Alex replied quietly, although he felt a little unsure if he should when Leona had asked him not to. "Leona, you get out of the way. Don't worry, I'll just test him, I won't seriously hurt him," Colin said to her. It was clear that he was confident that he would win. Then he winked to the man beside him, and that man pulled Leona out of the way. "Are you ready, boy?" Colin asked Alex. "If you really want to fight, I'm ready. Of course, this is a lot of nonsense," he replied. "Stop trying to squirm out of it, coward," Colin berated him, and then hit him in the face. It was true that Colin had almost won in the youth games, and his attack was ferocious. Alex was startled, and he quickly retreated to the side. But Colin was too fast, and he hit him again, this time missing his face, but hitting him hard on the neck. Alex felt a deep pain. "Yes!" Everyone watching cheered. "The little loser was easily beaten by Colin," one man called out. His friend said, "If Colin really goes for it, he'll knock that loser flat out." "I thought that because he dared to go up there, he must have some skill, but it seems that I was wrong. He's just a target for Colin. He's going to get pummeled." Leona was very anxious when she saw Alex getting hit in the face. She kneaded her hands together and looked nervously at the two men who were fighting on stage. Colin used his elbow to hit Alex hard in the chest, winding him. Alex was struggling to regain his breath when Colin barged his shoulder into him, knocking him back a few steps. Alex wobbled and nearly fell to the ground. Colin sneered. "Boy, you're not very strong after all. You're definitely in no shape to dance for us. You better walk away while you still can." Alex glanced at Leona and noticed that she looked a little calmer. He realized that she was certain that he would take the opportunity to retreat and avoid further injury. It annoyed him that Leona was so convinced that he would lose. With a rush of rage in his heart, he whispered to Colin, "It's time to finish this." Then, Alex rushed at him. Colin had never wanted this fight to go too far. He had wanted to teach Alex a lesson, but he was too afraid of damaging Leona's impression of him to really hurt him. He tried to get him to give up, but instead Alex tried to attack him. Colin smiled to himself and thought, "Well, Leona, now you can't blame me for what happens. I tried to help him, but this ignorant fool just won't admit it when he's defeated. Now I have no choice but to make him suffer." He nimbly dodged Alex's attack and knew that his opponent did not have time to turn around to defend himself. He kicked him hard on the hip, causing him to lose his balance and fall to the floor. Colin yelled out in triumph and leaped into the air, ready to land heavily on Alex as he struggled on the ground. "No!" Leona cried out. Colin looked at her horrified face and quickly stopped what he was doing. Instead, he gave Alex a quick look, looked down at him with contempt, and said, "You can forget dancing for us, loser." Then he went over to Leona. Lying on the ground, having been kicked by Colin and now hearing his insulting words, Alex felt totally humiliated in front of Leona. He felt guilty and angry with himself. Ignoring the pain in his body, he quickly climbed up from the ground, walked over to Colin, and smashed his fist into the back of his head. As Alex approached him from behind, Colin heard people shouting out warnings, and he tried to duck. He was a little too late, and Alex's fist hit his ear, causing it to bleed. He held his head as his heart filled with vengeance. He thought, "This time I'll show you no mercy." He said sinisterly, "You really don't want to live, do you?" Episode 190, Volunteers. Colin got into a fighting stance ready to punch Alex, who no longer felt so confident. He now knew that he couldn't beat his opponent in a fair fight. He stepped back, and as he planned, Colin did not hesitate to step forward. Alex took the opportunity to hit him hard in the chest. The only reason that Alex was able to hit him was that Colin's arrogance was causing him to become complacent. He thought very little of his opponent and wanted to finish the matter quickly with one impressive blow. But suddenly, Alex punched him again. He felt embarrassed and went into a rage. "Bastard!" Colin shouted without thinking. Onlookers were taken aback. At Richmond, he had always been the perfect image of a modest gentleman. No one had ever witnessed him losing his temper or resorting to vulgar language. He regained his composure and stood in a taekwondo stance. Keeping his eyes fixed on Alex, he edged closer to him. Aware that he was a martial arts expert, Alex knew that he had to be careful as he stepped slowly back. "Ah!" Colin shouted when he was 2 yards away from Alex. He stood on the toe of his left foot and raised his right foot high in the air in front of Alex's head. He was about to kick him in the face when he suddenly felt his foot being lifted, causing his whole body to fall backward. Alex had predicted what was about to happen and had acted quickly. As Colin's foot was still rising, he had taken a step forward and grabbed it, straightened up at the waist, and thrown his opponent backward. Fortunately, Colin was solid on his feet and managed to hop back without falling down. From 10 yards away, he rushed at Alex, jumped up, and aimed to kick him hard in the chest. It was a Taekwondo flying kick and was Colin's specialty. This maneuver had scored him many points when he competed in the youth games. Often, it had been enough to finish his opponents. He was planning to kick Alex in the head hard enough to give him a concussion or crack his skull. However, Alex had anticipated his attack. As he was still flying through the air, Alex managed to kneel and slip under him, avoiding the kick. Colin was astonished. Even more so when Alex kicked him from below. Colin lost his balance and fell to the ground. After several rolls, he stopped. What he didn't know was that Alex had also had some combat training. He had been taught how to protect himself with a knife, and had spent many hours practicing throwing a knife at moving targets. As a result, he developed excellent observation and anticipation skills. Although Colin's attack was skillful, he had started from too great a distance, which gave Alex time to predict what he was doing. In anticipation of the attack, his body had moved relatively before his mind had even processed what he had seen. He had not only managed to dodge the attack, but had also used Colin's momentum against him. "Colin!" cried out one of his supporters. "Are you okay, Colin?" another asked. "Quickly, somebody help Colin up," ordered another. Many people gathered around him and helped him up. Leona also walked over to him quickly to check whether he was hurt. I'm okay," he told them all. "I was just distracted for a moment." Although he had been beaten, he refused to admit that Alex was a better fighter than him. "Colin, can I be the dancer in your program now?" Alex asked proudly. Colin had said that he would be qualified to be a dancer if he could knock him down. "What? Do you still want to be a dancer? Just get lost," Colin replied angrily. "Colin, would you like me to call someone from the sports department to help you beat this boy?" one of Colin's friends asked. As other people glared at Alex, he noticed that Leona was also looking at him with disdain. He was puzzled and hurt by her expression. Colin looked at Alex coldly and said to the director, "Let him be a dancer in our program." Then Leona helped him walk off the stage. He certainly didn't want Alex to stay, but he acknowledged that he had made that deal with him, and he would look small if he tried to renege on it in front of Leona. The audience was almost all friends of Colin, and they felt nothing but contempt for Alex. They thought that he had been disrespectful. The director particularly despised him and yelled at him to get off the stage. Alex tried to remain calm. He quietly went backstage and found a chair to sit down and take a few deep breaths. Colin was also sitting on a chair backstage. Leona was standing next to him, asking him whether he was in any pain and applying ointment to his injuries. When Alex saw this, his blood boiled. He had also been wounded in the fight, but Leona was only worried about Colin. Not only that, but she was fussing over him and treating his wounds. Alex sat in his chair and waited for a long time. Even when Colin left, she did not go over and check on him. Alex couldn't believe that he had made so much effort to become the dancer for her show. The next day was Tuesday, and there was no class in the afternoon. Alex was supposed to go to the auditorium to practice, but the rehearsal was canceled because of Colin's injuries. This left Alex with nothing to do, and he was lying on his bed bored when he received a call from Philippa. She invited him to accompany her to the city. He had nothing else to do, so he agreed. At the school gate, Alex saw Philippa waiting for him. She was dressed in jeans and looked very energetic. She told him, "I want you to go to the Olympic Park with me. I'm going to sign up to be a volunteer." "A volunteer?" Alex asked curiously. "Yes, the Washington, D.C. Olympic Games are starting soon. I saw on their official website that they're recruiting volunteers who can speak foreign languages. It's a great way to earn some extra money, and it will be a wonderful experience. Volunteers also get certificates, which will look great on our resumes. It's a fantastic opportunity," Philippa had told him. She came from a modest family, and she knew that she would have to work hard to secure herself a good career. "That sounds like a good idea. I'm happy to go with you." Alex smiled and hailed a cab to take them to the Olympic Park. When they arrived, they quickly found the place for volunteers to sign up. It was in a large indoor gymnasium in the park, and there were already at least 100 people waiting in line. There was a row of tables in the hall where applicants were waiting to register. As Alex went to find the bathroom, Philippa joined one of the lines. After a moment, she heard someone calling her. "Philippa, over here!" She recognized that it was Miriam's voice and turned around. When she saw Miriam, she went and sat next to her. Since the incident in the Ruby Hotel, the two of them had not had any contact. Miriam had been feeling too embarrassed to contact Philippa, and Philippa didn't want to make Miriam feel worse. "I saw that you came here with Alex. Are you with him now?" Miriam had also come to sign up to volunteer, but she did it because she thought it might give her the chance to meet rich young men from exotic countries. She had spotted Philippa and Alex as they arrived, but because of what happened at the hotel, she had been hiding from Alex and didn't want him to see her. When she saw him head to the bathroom, she took the opportunity to speak with Philippa. That day in the Ruby Hotel, she had seen Ken and a mysterious lady helping Alex. She wanted to know who they were and what their relationship was with him. She suspected that maybe there was more to him than he let everyone think. Over the last few days, Miriam had been thinking about it a great deal. She had found a lot of information about Ken on the internet and knew that he was a powerful man, and she was convinced that the lady was someone even more powerful. They had both gone out of their way to help Alex. She was desperate to know his true identity. "You've got it all wrong. I just asked him to come with me to sign up. We're just friends," Philippa explained. "I thought he was studying in New York. Why are you friends with him?" Miriam asked. "He switched to Richmond. He told me the woman who helped him in the Ruby Hotel that day also helped him switch universities," Philippa said. "Okay, I wanted to ask you about that. Do you know what the relationship is between Alex and Ken and that woman from the hotel? Is Alex really just a poor student, or is he hiding something from us?" She was desperate to know what was really going on. "Forget it. You're reading too much into it. Alex told me that Ken and the woman only helped him because they met him when they bought 2 pancakes from his stall and felt sorry for him. When they saw him at the hotel, they decided to help him. Alex is nothing special," Philippa said. "Really? Can Alex get in touch with Ken? What's more, did Ken give him any money? Someone in Ken's position could be very generous," Miriam asked. Philippa shook her head and said, "No, they just met him by chance. How do you know so much about Ken? And why are you asking about their relationship with Alex? You're thinking too much about it." So, Alex really is a loser, Miriam confirmed. Hearing that Alex was not as she had imagined, she didn't know whether to be happy or disappointed. Philippa took her hand and said, "Miriam, don't say that. He's my friend. Besides, there's no reason for the two of you to hate each other. When he comes back, can you please make up with him?" "Make up with him? Philippa, it's easy for you to say, but remember, you left first that day. Do you know what a mess I was in by the end? I had to eat with my hands and drink soup on the floor. It ran down my chin and all over my clothes. Even my hair was dirty, and my whole body smelled of rice. Lester Yates called me a loser in front of everyone and kicked me out. I felt so humiliated that day. And who did all that to me? It was Alex's fault. I hate him so much. I will never be friends with him," Miriam said emotionally. Her face was scarlet, and her eyes were wet with tears.
Thank you for listening to Crown TV. Please don't forget to subscribe, share and turn on the notification button.